Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, July 30th, and you're listening to what was live at 7 a.m. on that day. We're live right now on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and you'll be able to hear us on Spotify or a number of other places. Find us out there. The Daily AI Show, also at the dailyaishow.com. Today, we're talking about image and voice publication rights. In the world where AI can easily replicate this mug right here, speaking just this way, without my permission, and just by me being on videos like this all the time, anyone can grab those videos from YouTube and create a digital avatar of me that could be caused to speak and say anything that the person who's driving that avatar wants me to. So this gives rise to a number of concerns around intellectual property rights on one side, or just personal privacy rights for many people. And we're going to discuss that today. This has to do with what I can see is an absence of publicity rights for this particular situation. So the big question is, who owns you and your likeness out there in the world? And while you own you, those likenesses can be used in a number of ways, but in the United States, not commercially. You do have a right to protect your likeness against unauthorized commercial use. But when we talk about social media, unless it's being used by and you can make an argument in court that somebody who's a major influencer and making a lot of money from it is exploiting your image for commercial right. But in general, someone publishing a video or a voice clone of you to social media, it'd be very, very unlikely that you could prevail or gain anything from trying to prevail against that. So there are a number of legal initiatives being taken by states in the United States and not so much in the EU, where they believe that personal privacy protections are a little stronger. But there are some legal initiatives we'll discuss on the show. So with that introduction, I'll open it up to our panel. What we have as a panel today is Jyunmi, we have Beth, and we have Karl, and I'm Andy Halliday. So kick it off.
So I was going to say, Karl is actually the first person who brought this up to my attention, because there was a conversation happening in Karl, your organization, about the executive's avatar. And there seemed to be a dearth of questions about, like, okay, let's talk more about this. What are the limitations in which, like, somebody can, what are the topics somebody's willing to speak on? Is there a timeline? Karl, do you want to go through that a little bit more?
Sure. So the example or the situation was the company that I used to work for before I went into 0 to 60. They do RFPs to land clients, right? A lot of companies do that, and in their RFPs, they want to create some videos, have a personal touch, and then include a message from one of the executives. Now, it's obviously with an executive in a global company, it's hard to get that person on camera, record for a lot of RFPs. So initially the thought was, hey, could you just could you make a script, have this, we'll record this person, and then, but could you change the name of the company, the date, very few words. And I was like, okay, we go to the script, I guess, with that. But I was like, wait a minute. If you want to do that, it's going to be kind of generic. So wouldn't you want a more fluid, dynamic, different type of messaging, right? You're going to have to do that. It's going to be hard to do that using Descript's voice cloning. It gets a little messy if it's longer sentences. So the thought was then, hey, why don't we create an avatar or an AI, clone of this person? Very simple. You can do it there's a myriad of tools that you can do this with this now. And then this came back in about a day. Hey, yeah, we got approval from the executive. Hey, let's go do it. I was like, okay, hold on a second. I want you to really, I want both parties to think about this through. I want the executive to really think about what you've just done. One, you have verbally allowed a company to create an AI avatar of you. You've allowed that company to also, with good intentions, to make it say things that you may have never ever said before. Again, most likely for this RFP. Have you thought of what kind of permissions are we looking at here? Does that mean every single use? Is this a broad permission? And what if you leave, resign, quit, get let go? Do we still have control of this? Even if the company had AI governance and policy documents, there's nothing that covered this. So I was like, from an individual level, you might want to think about that. Then from a business level, okay, so cover your ass time. Do you have full permission? What happens if people, if they say one thing, and then also what happens if they say something wrong? Or the situation I always lean to would be, it's not with malicious intent. And we all know how, let's say an email, when somebody sends out an email from an executive, it's usually not from the executive, especially a company that big. It's usually communications people, marketing people, whoever, that write their script, write the message, write the email, goes through a bunch of approvals and gets sent out. But we've all seen the email, oh, sorry, the message was incorrect. Here's the new email. And for whatever reason, they use the wrong version. Version 4 was used instead of version 5. And it's usually something stupid like, oh, we didn't use an and here and or there. Okay. But what if you did that with your avatar and they said something, again, innocuous, let's say 2 million instead of 2.5 million, has big ramifications on performance, could be your stock. And it's kind of hard to be like, oops, that wasn't it. We'll send a new avatar message. Completely different, right? So that's what, and obviously no company has really thought that through. I would say from the executive perspective, hey, I don't want to be on camera anymore. This is going to be so easy. Obviously it hasn't given it thought. From the company's perspective, I just want to get these RFPs out. We want to get this out. We haven't really thought this through. So, but that is the situation that can come up. And I'm sure we can have the discussion. And for those listening, for those watching, you could probably think of other situations where, oh, wait a minute, this is actually has an impact. And we're just talking business impact, right? We're not talking any malicious intent. We're just like, hey, this is an accident that could happen. We never thought this through. Potential lawsuits down the road. We made that person say stuff, right? There's so many scenarios and none of this is actually covered. So yeah, that was the situation that kind of kicked off this whole thing for me.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight a couple of things that were said is, number one, the awareness, right, of these potential pitfalls. And number two, what legal ramifications. There are current rights and laws in place, some legal framework in place to protect likeness, but there is currently no specific law that covers cloning and duplication. And that's what's going through right now is laws surrounded around that. And so, and I think begs to the larger context of, data rights and data ownership, as a whole. Like you pointed out, Karl, I think there needs to be an extra step to help along those awareness for in any individuals that is in a company who the company wants to make an avatar of. And that's usually going to be the C-suite or the executive suite and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily limit to that, right? What if, Just as an innocuous example, the concept of, everybody wasn't there for the company photo, so we're going to Photoshop them in, right? So in this case, we're just going to make an AI avatar of everybody, and that way it'll look better, or we can make company Christmas cards. And like I said, this is very, very innocuous, but I hope that it gives a basis for thoughts of, well, once your image is created, and most companies have any work that's created, or any work that you do for a company, or any kind of actions that you take is all company property in one form or another, then this becomes IP for the company to use in any way, right? So now you have to be more cognizant of what your employment contracts are going to be, and you have to be a little more cognizant of any freelance work and things like that, because usually these are, broad stroke covered in those SOWs and other and other paperwork from HR and things like that. So I think the idea, or the root idea, of all forms of your likeness, the data that you create because you exist, these kinds of root questions and protections and privacies and ownership and control of that information is something that we need to put a spotlight on, and how best we can protect people from, exploitation, or even just mistakes that are made down the line.
Right. So one of the things that you're really highlighting is not only are in the world today, everyone is sort of a content creator, whether you're an active content creator or not. In this context, everyone is a potential performer, because the rights that you're talking about are kind of standard in actors' contracts or models' contracts or those sorts of things. There is generally a limitation, the ways that it can be used or the ways that it can't be used. But that's not standard in that's not what regular people, that's what muggles, not performers, typically think about. But now everybody has the potential to be that because of digital avatar technology. Yeah. And I think one of the other things that has always really concerned me about it is the potential for moving into a situation where a customer or a client or someone who has engaged with me has a memory of my engaging with them that I don't have, because it wasn't me, it was the avatar. And I think that starts to be a dangerous, slippery slope, particularly as AI starts to challenge people's perceptions of what's true and what's not. What can you believe? Can you believe your eyes? Can you believe your ears? Is this something that was generated by, somebody that you can trust? And I think that's a really important piece to consider, right? That's, for me, a benefit of having an avatar that maybe is my avatar but doesn't look like me or have my voice. It is an avatar that I control and I own, but it isn't me.
Yeah, I actually, I think it was Jen in the comments who said, well, maybe I do have an avatar in the form of the emoji on my phone. And this is what you're referring to as maybe digital representations, avatars, ought to be distinctly different and animated in some way that makes it clear that it's not a live recording of the actual person.
Yeah, that's a good point, Andy, because one of the endeavors for tracking and watermarking of AI is to, we've seen it from companies like YouTube and Meta and things like that, is to put a stamp that says, hey, go ahead, and if this is primarily AI, you need to check this mark. But right now it's voluntary. Right? It's not an automatic process, which I think is that next step. And there are organizations that that have been put together by some of the larger companies like Adobe and Meta and Microsoft and Apple that are working together. I think they're called the CCPA or something like that, the Coalition of Protected Association or something like that. Content Protection Association. That's what it is. And so they're endeavoring to work together so that that kind of watermarking and tracking can be applied at the creation level, right? Working with and then working with AI companies so that there's some sort of watermark on the on whatever is created, and as that's distributed, you can track it through whatever system. Now they are working on that kind of thing. It's not the silver bullet kind of situation. It's just one more layer in which it will deter and help maintain privacy or digital privacy on those images. But it's not, like I said, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything. We need a multi-pronged approach. Lots of checks and balances to make sure that people are protected. Now, beyond that, there was something that I think that Karl was talking about in terms of, we found an error in our AI release, and we're just going to redo another one with the fixes. And by saying the difference between, we had a profit of 2 million versus 2.5 million, that might affect stock prices and things like that. That effect has a specific name. Can't remember what it is, but that effect of being able to imprint in someone's mind, or they create a memory out of viewing it or experiencing, hearing it, reading it or whatnot, is going to leave that residual damage, for lack of a better word, right? That's going to be in there. So you can come back and say, it was a mistake. This is the correction. That still has a harder time of overwriting that first impression. So there's an issue there, is having experiencing it in the first place is going to be an issue.
Well, it's think about. I like to think about as, people take a screen capture of anything without the context, right? Now you just take a screen capture or record the first video, not the updated video, of that person saying something. Like, to me, this is like the real harm isn't about political deepfakes. I think politics is too scrutinized. There will be, but there'll be a lot of a lot of people now are, to me, I believe they're dreading a little bit more the level of critical thinking about certain videos. It's getting higher to the point where you're starting to not believe anything. About that, I don't know. Can't believe anything. But I think the most danger is the ones that are over this president said this, or this candidate said this. No, I don't think it's that. It's more of these tiny little switches of someone saying something, nothing inflammatory, but something wrong intentionally. So they've made the change intentionally to make that person, it still flows within context, but just a small change. And if you were a supervillain, you wouldn't do this once. You do this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So now you have a bank of fraudulent things that person did in a very believable manner. So that, I think that's where it starts becoming harder. And obviously, as the technology comes better, you'll start, a lot of us who are in the space, you can kind of tell most of the time that thing is AI, that thing isn't. There's just some nuances that people have. But again, as you get better, you can't tell. And then to the naked eye, it'll be, that person actually said this or that. And then from not just a deepfake perspective, then you'll get a bunch of lawsuits. And I think this is where, I'm sure actors, voice actors, they're very concerned, because I think there was someone came up with the description, here's an amazing movie. Everybody wants to be cast in it. but then the producers are like, oh, we'll cast you, but you have to sign this contract that says that we can use your likeness for like the perpetuity of this franchise. So think about the Avengers. If you are, whatever, the Avengers movie 5 years from now, and they're like, well, I don't want to pay that person anymore. We'll just use your digital likeness. Yeah, we'll pay you some royalties, but we don't need to pay you, the actor, because we think you're getting too old. We think, or you did something that we don't agree with, or something like that. So we'll just use your digital likeness. In fact, our whole movie could be half digital likeness. And because the technology is so good, none of you can tell. That's where the danger is. And I think like those are points for like, hey, we need some regulation here to be like, what are some things that protect people from this?
Right. And that goes back to the ownership as well, as what are we going to see in these contracts? You talk about actors and SAG-AFTRA, and they have their current contract, but it does still have that loophole of enforcing the for lack of a better term, the producer's will, right? Because it's a matter of sign this thing so that you can be a part of the film, or you can't. We'll find someone else, right? And once they have some sort of language of that use, or digital duplicate kind of use, then yes, again, there is all kinds of room for abuse of that kind of relationship. So I think that comes back to everybody's going to need to have some sort of standardized clause, some sort of standardized protection, some base level things so that it doesn't get exploited. Because that right now, that's sort of, water will flow downhill kind of thing. So if there isn't resistance there, it's going to go to the lowest point, and that kind of concept. So I think that's the main takeaway I'm getting from this discussion, and is that we need more scrutiny. And I think that comes in back to what you were talking about in big critical thinking and awareness, and that comes down to AI literacy, right? So we need to recognize what the current state of art is, and what the current abilities are, and being able to think about, where are these sources coming from? Being able to track back what sources are being claimed. All of these kinds of things. And it does make absorbing content harder, because you have to always take it with a grain of salt. So I think it's going to be a very arduous climb for everybody, because there's always the gap between society and technology and that pace. And I think with AI and how quickly it iterates on itself, it's going to be a harder time to catch up.
I think we talk to the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karl.
I just wanted to add one thing too, just to throw this out. I was just looking at some of the comments in terms of global enforcement, right? Regulations. But like, if you have, this is not a shot against open source. This is more of just a comment on if you have technologies that are open source, that you can then do this with anybody. What stops external, like non-North American, let's say, film producers to create movies that are not, we've seen a lot on YouTube about like some, for I think, much way better versions of. One of the things I remember is the Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi fight in, Star Wars: A New Hope, where,
fan edit type of thing.
Fan edits, right? But imagine having that, but then adding, right, Hayden Christensen and what's his name? William
McGregor.
Yes, Ian McGregor. Just adding them as part of your fan fiction and having the capabilities to do that. These things will be all over the place, and you can't really. You'll be asked to take it down, but it's going to be everywhere. And by that time, it's right. So you also have to think about that, because anybody, as Brian said as Andy said at the very beginning, as long as we're doing this, anybody can clone and copy whatever we're doing, right? So as long as we've been in movies, everything is now fair game.
And Siska's mentioning that's already happened at the end of a movie, at the end of the Flash movie, digital likenesses of the deceased actors in super iconic roles. Yeah.
And Cisco, I don't know specific about that movie, but I know there has been a move towards establishing those relationships with the estates, mainly because a lot of movies over the last few years have been doing that, specifically like Star Wars movies. I think they were the first major ones to be recognized that they were doing this by putting in, replacement for Princess Leia and, Grand Moff Tarkin, those characters replacing their actors' likeness or recreating their actors' likeness and performances for the film. But yeah, we'll see a stronger move towards that as it becomes more and more prevalent in the music industry. Sampling of performances and voices for various rappers and singers and artists that has sort of brought all of this media exposure to those to this subject, like with Drake, and then there's the beef with Lamar and all of these different performers using clips and things like that, and it becomes a matter of being able to establish those relationships. So I think there is a right way and a wrong way to do these things. Unfortunately, in the tech world, there is a lot of ask for forgiveness, not permission kind of thing. So I think that might exacerbate the issue a little bit.
Let me address some of the emerging legislation that's occurring. And we've talked just in the last few moments about the difficulty of enforcement of that legislation. But, the people who are the legislators are trying to find ways to make sure that there's some possibility of enforcement, even if it's going to have to happen through, private litigation. So Tennessee has passed the Ensuring Likeness, Voice, and Image Security Act of 2024. That's Elvis, ELVIS. Good on Tennessee and for Memphis and for Nashville. That creates liability for just publishing or distributing an individual's voice or likeness without their authorization. Now, by making that broad, just publication, not commercial use, just if I publish it, that Tennessee legislation would, make me liable for someone's claims of damage, as a result of that publication. Now, in the United States, it's mostly states that are pursuing this, and there isn't any past federal legislation, but there are two main federal legislation initiatives underway. And one of them is called the No Fakes Act. That's nurture the originals, foster art, and keep entertainment safe. No fakes. And that creates liability for distribution of AI-generated deepfakes and voice impersonations as well. Same concept of doesn't matter that you did it for commercial purposes, just the publication of a deepfake would be, a cause for liability. And then there's another one called the No AI Fraud Act. No artificial intelligence fake replicas and unauthorized duplications. And that would prohibit unauthorized public distribution of AI-generated voice replicas or digital depictions of an individual. Now, the likelihood that either one of these will pass in the forms that they've been promoted, is a political issue at the federal level. And so we don't know how that will turn out. But you can see that there's an attempt to make it more difficult for someone to do anything other than an acknowledged parody. So if you're trying to misrepresent a person's likeness and or their expressions and speech and voice, that could be a cause for liability.
Now, I wanted to bring up one more legal framework that's been introduced. While it doesn't directly apply to AI duplicates, it does apply to privacy rights in general. And we know all of data is kind of interconnected nowadays, and how it's drawn and used and derived and things like that. And it's called the American Privacy Rights Act of 2024, or APRA. And its main points are right to access, correct, delete, and port or move personal data, opt-out mechanisms for data processing, targeted advertising, algorithmic decision-making, data minimization requirements, and the key thing here is preemption of non-sectorial state privacy laws. So essentially what that means is this will be a federal umbrella that you have to meet these requirements first, above and beyond anything the state creates. And having those federal level acts or laws or whatnot are really important to try and make sure there's a unified or standardized approach. So my first impressions and hope is that these kind of baseline pillars of these legal frameworks will be what upholds more specific or significant laws that talk about AI or AI duplication, like no frauds or no fakes and things like that.
All right. Anybody have anything else to add?
So I think that one of the things that's really important to take into consideration in this moment is that AI duplicates are still detectable, right? So we're in a place, so there's a story that came out about Ferrari a couple weeks ago, and there was a scam attempted, a WhatsApp message was sent, and then a phone call was made with a likeness of the CEO's voice asking for something unusual. There were a bunch of pieces of this that made the person who was receiving the scam suspicious. And so they asked, like, what book did you recommend last week when we were talking? And it was a scam, so the scammer hung up, and that's and so it didn't go through. But those are those at this point are sort of like dumb scammers, right? Like the technology is here or very soon going to be possible that it's not going to be detectable. Still be detectable if you ask for the book, right? That's a really great idea. But that's part of what this is about, is that if you are looking at the tech and saying, it's so obviously not my likeness, not my voice, right? I don't need to worry about this now. You do need to worry about this now. Like, it's a great conversation to have. It's a great thing to think about. And I'm wondering if there is like a proactive release that you could get for yourself that you would then ask all the people you do business with to sign, that protects your own interests, right? And particularly in the absence of other standard interests. Because
Good idea.
Andy, you said in a previous conversation where people were talking about we were talking about whether businesses would make the choice to keep people on even though it was less expensive to use AI. And your point that you made in that was that there's a fiduciary responsibility, right? That's not necessarily like a choice. If you can, as a company, get more accomplished for less, that may be something that people have to do. And I feel like that has a role in this conversation too, right? If I don't have to compensate you because you mistakenly gave me rights to your likeness, then I may have a fiduciary responsibility, even though ethically I may choose this. It may, Andy, do you have thoughts about that, Jyunmi? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that fiduciary responsibility, its intention when it was created was to protect people from being in those situations, right? But has sort of morphed into a catch-all excuse for certain practices. So yes, I think that should be reassessed, especially in this space. It's in the intent it was in which it's created is no longer the way it is used.
Yeah, in the corporate context, I think that the use of my likeness and or my knowledge base, which could be captured in an advanced AI system, and then I could be replaced by that AI system. That'll shift the whole concept of employment. Like while I'm being employed, if I'm being monitored and replicated while being employed, so that I can be imitated by an AI ultimately, so that I become a short-term gig worker in effect, rather than a lifelong employee. That shifts society in a dramatic way. You remember, there was a time, even while I've been alive, when people joined a company with the expectation of lifetime employment. There was a compact between the employee and the company that you serve us and we're going to take care of you. And that's kind of eroded in the capitalist system at this point. That was very true in Japan. I know that was, the expectation, a cultural expectation. And so AI being able to replace me is definitely an issue. Let me ask a quick question before we go to a wrap up. And that is there an easy to access free trial of a digital avatar clone that you can do? Like we've talked about Hey Gen, and our colleague Aaron has used that, going back more than a year. But is there a tool out there right now where you could take some video of yourself on your laptop camera or just, from your phone and generate an AI avatar of yourself and, then type in what you want it to say and do that as an experiment for our audience who want to try that?
Yeah. Just really quick to cover one point about the previous topic was we are seeing evidence of that exact replacement process with folks who create programmable or automated sequences for their workflows. That there's a tendency, I've made everything automated now for you. Well, we no longer need to employ you because all of those automations exist. So that's where I'll leave that.
We've seen that as a thing, like somebody's actually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Lots of DevOps folks and people in that space, they will build automated workflows for, existing workflows in a company. And once those automations are in place and they can either be maintained by a junior or whatnot, the senior or mid-level person will be released.
Interesting.
So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know how common it is, but I've heard multiple stories of people going through this process, and I've experienced it myself to a certain degree. But to go on to your latest statement or your latest question, yes, I believe synesthesia or
synthesia. Yeah,
synthesia. Yes. Now the other one's a brain state. So synthesia. They. I believe they have some basic access, so you can use them. They tout them. They've recently come out with a 2.0. They position themselves particularly as a AI avatar or AI duplicate type of service, so that you can do trainings and have an AI customer service agent and those kinds of that kind of space. Another one is I think it's not deep learning, deep mind. Sorry, totally blanking on that right now. But there is a few out there.
Deep avatar,
right? Because I saw a demo of their work, and their work is they have a method for you to use your own imagery or whatever you supply to make an avatar. but their space is a little more about creating a AI avatar for their chatbot backend. So more on the customer service side of things and whatnot. But there are several apps and several technologies that are things like, I believe, Meta released one, or Microsoft released one, where you can take your static image and your voice, and it'll give you a talking head version of yourself. So all the elements are there. So yes, there's lots of free trials. People can experiment with cloning their voice, cloning their image, and applying and then turning it into an AI avatar.
Right. There are a bunch of Meta released that early. Microsoft released that early, but like Live Portrait, there are a bunch of things that have done that photo to lip sync. So you can clone your voice fairly realistically. You can make a picture of yourself, or someone can make a picture of you, talk in a way that that looks somewhat realistic. The gap right now is whether the lip sync looks accurate, right? So when it's like they're singing a song or something where the vowels are all held out and that kind of stuff, or it's something that has a lot of data behind it, like what it looks like when someone's rapping, what it looks like when someone's singing. Those are better lip sync things. I think when it comes down to individually, this is what my face looks like when I'm speaking, there's far less data about that. So that starts to get a little uncanny, but we're not very far from it at all.
No, and let's wrap it up here.
So last one, Runway.
Okay.
Runway has a lip sync feature that they've recently added as well. So you can take any existing video or any video that you create and create a lip sync of your audio to that image or to that video, so that it will align.
Great. Okay, so audience, go out there and play with it. Try to make a video avatar of yourself that uses your voice. So voice cloning plus video imitation of you. Come join us tomorrow. Tomorrow we cover the news. We'll catch up on the news that's happening in the background as we do these deep dives on different individual subjects. So every Wednesday we cover the news. And on Thursday, is AI better at empathy than humans are? And there's some strong evidence that interacting with an empathetic AI, and we'll give you the examples of those empathetic AIs, is just as, and perhaps even better than talking to a person who is a friend or a therapist in providing you with succor and support. So thank you very much. It's been another show, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow and every day after that, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Pacific.
Aloha.